And we're back. So yeah, that was fluffy pink unicorns dancing on a rainbow.
Pink fluffy unicorns.
Oh, I'm sorry, I messed up
my
okay.
I can guarantee.
Wait, can you guys guess which one is mine?
The fluffy pink unicorn.
How did you know?
Easy guess. Tamlin is gonna have that song stuck in his head.
No, I don't think so. I already can't remember.
There's a 10-hour loop if you need it, I'm sure.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and that was not the 10-hour loop version. That was just what was it, like 2 minutes or a minute and a half or something like that. But we decided to break up the darkness and the hate and anger of Inoric and the Tear Doll and brighten it up a little bit with pink fluffy rainbow.
Fluffy pink rainbow unicorn.
Dancing on Fluffy.
Sure, that was the recent video.
Alright, so now and the story of the what is it? Whispers in Shadow. Was it
Dreaming in Shadow?
Dreaming in Shadow. It had 2 distinct parts, right? We talked about the first one is that Inoric and Vixudra, their rise and fall from grace and power. And somebody mentioned that it might be a story, 3 different stories, right? Because you have that story, then you have the Tear Doll, and then you have Ithio's story. So yeah, you could kind of look at it that way, that there's the Tear Doll, there's Ithiosaur, and then there's Inoric. But if you look at it that way, then Ithiosaur's story in that particular e-novel is short, boring. The only reason it's important is the end. It's not even important then. It's because then he's like, oh, that's who I am. I'm the reincarnated soul of Vixudra, and I'm here to live in the Umbra with you because I am bound to you. I mean, you realize.
Technically, it was because Innerbrook was like, hey, you want some power? I got some power over here if you want it.
Yeah.
And Ithiosaur's like, fine, I won't eat you yet.
I don't think that Ithiosaur had the power to do that.
No, but at the end, it was definitely like, they'll see who's ruling by whose side. Mwahaha. And I'm like, really, dude? He's a god. Come on.
You tried to fight him when he pulled you down into the well or into the pool of water, and you're just like, nope, can't fight. I'm sinking.
Well, to Ithiosaur's credit, he did have like a missing tail, a missing leg, and a broken wing. And he hadn't eaten in like days. So there's that. But still, dude, give it up. You're not a deity.
True. So the Tear Doll specifically portion of the novel, I talked about it before the show. I'm going to throw it out there again. It was short. It was boring. And other than the end, well, who cares?
I thought it was all leading up to something much different. I was really, really disappointed with the end. I thought it was going to be like they survived in the Umbra for like centuries. Puppy! They survived in the Umbra for like centuries, and like they had to make pacts with like these evil beings that lived there in order to survive, and it twisted them and changed them. No. That's not what happened at all.
Right. And I thought that they were setting it up to be a certain way, right? Like we see we see the soul bonding ritual between Inoric and Vixudra, right? And like, didn't you think that like, oh, I get it. One of the Tear Doll is gonna soul bond with Ithiosaur in the Umbra, and it's going to be corrupted by some sort of magic, and so all of the offspring are going to be dragon. That would have been a way to go too. I didn't even think of that. Right, because the way that they had introduced the Tear Doll to us before that e-novel is that the Tear Doll were tainted by dragons, and that's why they had the horns, right? And so we're all expecting going into that e-novel that the that the Tyrdal are going to be somehow connected to dragons, and it's not.
Or demons.
No, because they said dragon. Because in SOE Live in years past, they had specifically mentioned dragons as the horns. That's the reason why the Dark Elves had horns, is because of a connection with dragons. And so
I missed one.
Right, and that's where now that we see that. Wait a minute, this isn't. Like I'm just going to call the Akhaven. I'm just going to call them demons because that's what they look like. That's what they appear to be. They're the reminiscent of an ancient race of people who been living in the Umbra, and now they are demonic. They have horns and 4 arms, and so the Dark Elves that we find out, they're not tainted by dragons. They're tainted by demons. They have horns that are demonic horns, not dragon horns. So yeah, like you said, we went into the e-novel expecting it to be a little bit more like big, and it turned out that the reason that they are tainted by this demon magic is that they went to have a feast in the Umbra, and while they were there,
they got roofied.
Yeah, and Ulrich was like, "Hey, you're merged. You are now tainted," and so it was like. The short summary of the e-novel from the Tyrdal point of view is that the Tyrdal are in the Umbra. The Tyrdal suck at life in the Umbra. The Tyrdal go to have a feast by this race that attempts to rescue them. But oh no, it's an ambush. Now that they're no longer the Tyrdal, the elves. That now they're the Tyrdal, the demon plagued dark elves that are mind controlled by Anoric and sent back into Norath. Done. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was really hoping for like demon packs and selling your soul piece by piece and
exactly
something a little grittier than a tentacle burst through this other creature's chest and put it into your brains and then like fed that creature into your brains. It was very Cthulhu-esque.
You got Cthulhu out of that? I didn't necessarily.
Well, it's got tentacles coming from a pool.
So it's either Cthulhu or hentai.
Oh god, no! Oh, they are elves! Oh no!
You're welcome.
Yeah.
For the
I
record,
went there.
I did not go there. It wasn't me this time.
So, yeah, I didn't like the story of the Tyrdal in the Umbra. Not the outcome. The outcome needed to be what it was because. The outcome of that story needed to be the Tyrdal coming back into the world of Norath being tainted. Okay, well let's just go to another point that we know based upon our reading of the interviews and the story is that the story of the Tyrdal is not yet done. That there is the beginning of that story. Which is the fall of Bastion, where the Tyrdal are on the verge of extinction against the dragons in the War of the Scales. They fled into a portal into another realm where the other races of the Combine fled to Kunar. That's the first phase of the story. The second phase of the story is their story in the Umbra and what happens to them there. I thought it would be a better story. Turns out that it's just what happened. But what we now know...
It felt like setting up the other story.
Exactly. It felt like a setup of the third story, which we don't have yet. And I'm going to play a little clip from the workshop show where they talked about Kinos, because that was when Steve Moorgard talked a little bit about the Tyrdal once they come back to Norath. And it kind of, I don't know, preps us for that third story. So give me just 1 second. I'm going to get it up and running. And
that the Tyrdal have returned as well. And... they'll actually be on Antonica when the Combine arrive there. And this is a new race that was changed from the elves who went to Umbra. And so this throws another kind of wrench into the works, because this is a people that haven't been seen before. So, and the elves aren't necessarily comfortable with interacting with them. So will the Dark Elves want to be involved in the Combine, or are they seeking their own path? That's something that we'll reveal in the course of the fiction.
It'd be very interesting to find out what's going on there.
Okay, and that I think that sets it up well. What Steve Deneuser Moorgard was talking about is that the Dark Elves, after they've come back from the Umbra into the world of Norak, their story is not yet done, and it sounds like there's a choice that they have to make. And obviously, because what we feel like is that when they come back from the Umbra, they're basically mind-controlled minions of Norak. So they have to... I'm assuming they divide themselves into a faction that is freed of that sort of control, and then there's a faction that remains behind and is the Enoric worshipping, hate-filled dark elves that we know from other lore and other stories. So that the Teardal split in two, and there's a playable faction that is free of that mind control, and then there's a non-playable faction that is the evilness that we have to fight every once in a while because they're evil and hateful. I don't know. What do you guys?
I really, really, really hope that they clear this whole mind control Serpents of Inaruk thing up with another book, because I can see it happening right now, where every single person who wants an RP a Dark Elf is, oh, well, I know what happened in Umbra because I tapped into my memories from before, and I totally am like a servant of Inaruk, and like I'm evil, and I'm just gonna do evil things because I'm evil. Come on. Come on.
I, absolutely, and the worst thing is that you brought it up before the show, is that there's, in the role-playing element, there's going to be metagaming, right? Because there's an e-novel that says what happens to the Teardal in the Umbra. It's like, all you have to do is read the e-novel, and you know, you as a person, as a real human being, know what happened, but does your character that you play know what happened there? Do you know that you were tainted by the power of Norak? Because what would it look like from the point of view of just some elf sitting down to have dinner in this other realm, and then the next thing you know, you're back in Norak? It's like there's a little bit of gray area about what they know and what they remember of what happened to them then. And then there's that whole gray area of I forget her name. Who was it? Feldoris was knocking boot. He was
Lannis.
Alanis, right? But she's not the only one that you can assume that, like, from their point of view, it was just a couple of weeks that they were in the Umbra. But from the time dilation aspect of the story, right? Because I think Moorgard has posted about that on the forums. I'll have to double check that because I didn't double check that before the show. That weeks would pass in the Umbra, and it would be centuries outside of the Umbra. So for the
and we just
Teardal,
had a question about that in chat too, and I absolutely believe that time passes differently, and it's hard to tell because one, elves are long-lived, so they won't feel the passage of time like a human would, and two, they're Teardal. They're highly trained, hardened, elite warriors. They're not going to notice things like, they're not going to notice like hunger as much as like a hobbit would, for example. Like, they're not going to notice these things because they are toughened, they are hardened, they're used to war. And I think at one point in the book they said, can you even remember a time when we weren't at war? So, I mean, once you get into a routine like that, where one day just feels exactly like the next, whether you're a long-lived elf or not, it's going to seem like it's just the same day over and over again. So I think that, one, their perception of time passing was distorted because they have no sun to go by. They just have like I'm tired, so it's time for me to sleep.
Yeah.
And I think that there is something different about that plane of existence where time does pass differently, where it might be sped up, so it might have felt like weeks or months or, to the Teardal, but it was really years or centuries or whatever on Norath. I think both things are happening.
Yeah, I absolutely concur with that. I wish that I had it pulled up so that I could just point to it, because I'm almost sure that Moorgard had mentioned before that there is a time dilation, because it also wouldn't make sense for the Dark Elves. Like, you might not notice, like, you might lose a week, you might think that a day, you felt like it was a day, but it actually turned out to be in a week, but you wouldn't turn weeks into centuries. And that's how long we know that the Combine was in Kunark. And then the Combine comes back. and the Tyrdal are there. But there's like a mass, like decades and at least a century or two of time that has gone by. The Tyrdal are not gonna, they're not gonna make that type of time mistake.
And not only that, but we know that when we start playing, the Combine have been there for 20 years, 2 decades, I think they've said, on Norath. Like, back from their enslavement, boat trips, and everything else. So they've been on Amaril. Is it Amaril, the continent that they landed on?
Yeah, yes, or Antonica.
Amaril.
Amaril is the eastern one, and Amaril, or
Right.
Antonica. Antonica
Okay, so
is
they're on the
western.
mainland. Let's just say that they're on the mainland to avoid messing everybody up.
Right?
So they're back to the mainland, and they've been there for about 2 decades. We don't know how long before they come back the Dark Elves arrived. We have no idea. It could have been 150 years. You know, they could have only been gone for 50 years or something like that. And so I'm really, really anxious to get this second lore book because I need to know.
Yeah, the
Well,
third
third
part of
lore
the
book,
story.
yeah.
Third story. Absolutely. And, all right, here's where I'm going to hardcore speculate. And that is that we know that there are also going to be e-novels that talk about the story that takes place after the Combine leaves, and they flee away from the dragons to land on Kunark and reestablish themselves. And there has to be some sort of story that's there because we know that the Ixar don't exist on they're a new race to the Combine that joins them once they arrive onto Kunark. So there's going to have to be some sort of story about like what happens with that, so that the Ixar join with the Combine races. And then in that same video, and I'll post the link up after the show but in that same Keynos workshop show from January, where Steve is talking about the Tyrdal in coming back to Norath, what we find is that there has to be some sort of story that drives the Combine to come back as well to establish the city of Keynos. And they hint at it. They talk about like there's a compelling reason for the elves and the humans and all the Combine races to want to come back to Amaril, Antonica, to wherever, to leave Kunark. And we don't know what that reason is. I am betting that the Dark Elves are one of those reasons. And I'm gonna go deep down that rabbit hole. And the reason why I say that is because Karamor Thex was a king. He was not a king. He was a prince. He was a prince of elves who was the son of the king. Which means
But they started calling him king because they thought that they were the last of his kind.
Right. Which means that his offspring are the heir, and we know that he made an offspring. And that's one of the important neural
2.
Well, right. Well,
He has a son from his original marriage with Neria, and then he has a baby with Lannis. So there are 2.
Right.
And depending on how long they've been back, there was another question in chat about whether or not, like, can they be a faction if they've only been back for 20 years or that sort of thing. Maybe they came back 100 years. That's more than enough time for elves to establish themselves. So at that point, if they are the only Eldar on the entire continent because the Combine Eldar have sailed away, they're the only ones left. They're going to set up their own king.
So your brain went the same place mine was. That Karamor Thex's offspring that is a Tyrdal, as in corrupted by the demons, establishes himself as the king. It says, I am a king of the elves. And the Combine are like, what? We got rid of our kings. We have a council now. We're all equals. And they're like, we don't like the word king. And we especially don't like elf kings because you assholes drug us into a war with the dragons.
And not only that, but I think there is going to be a sex line in the Combine too that's like, what? What are you talking about? Like, no way would Karamor do that. Because he said in the books that this was absolutely 100% not like him at all. And if he's not even there to corroborate the story, all they have is Lannis's word. Or the rest of the elves' word that, oh yeah, no, they were totally hooking up. Yeah, Sure they were. Sure,
Right,
you're a Thex.
And I think that Legendary Neurotoxin asked that question in chat about like the chapter called Lust in the story, was it even necessary? And I think that is the reason why the sex scenes between Karamor and Emerus needed to be in the story, because they established not only that they were having that there was a relationship established and there was an heir that was conceived, but that it had to have been believable that this elf is now the heir to the Thex line, or one of the heirs, especially if he comes back and calls himself a king, because it reminds me very much of like the Roman Civil War, right? Is because the reason why Julius Caesar was so distrusted by the other Roman senators is because he came back as a dictator, and they had a profound distrust of that type of rulership of governing. They're like, no, we have a Senate and we have representation and we vote and we agree and we compromise and we politic. And then Julius was like, come back as a dictator, and like they're like, no, we don't need that. And I think that that's the same sort of story that we see. And again, this is totally speculation, and we won't know for certain until we get those other books. But it does set up that same type of story where the elves are like, there's an elf kingdom that's been reestablished, and we have got to go and say something about it so that we don't repeat the same mistakes.
New question in chat if you want me to read it.
Sure.
From Zalmatrix, do you think EQN will have faction in a discrete number as what has been done in the past, or will faction be a bit more dynamic that may be something that cannot be boiled down to a particular discrete number? I hope it'll be dynamic, and I hope factions can become defunct, and you can work so hard to get your faction up with this certain, like, for example, the Dryads, and then have them be totally obliterated in like a war between them and like the dark spirits of the trying to take over the forest, and that whole faction is just like completely useless now. I hope that happens. I'm gonna be so mad if it does, but I'm also going to enjoy it because it'll make me feel like choices matter.
Yeah, and like I spent some time diving back into that first text-based role-playing game that I played, and a lot of what was great about that is that they avoided numerical quantities and tried to use descriptive quantities, so that instead of being like, I have 1,000 hit points, or they would be like, you're at full health. Instead of, like you took 5 points of damage, it would be like you took a light hit and now you feel bruised. They use that sort of language, and I think that it definitely it allows itself to tell a more interesting game, because you can't just boil down the essence of gameplay down to numerical values. Because that's like going back into faction grinding in Warcraft. It's like, okay, well, if I kill these mobs, they each give me 12 faction. I need to get 60,000 in order to be exalted with them. I can kill 5 in a minute, which means that it turns into a computation, and so that your faction grind is boiled down into this is how many hours it will take me to achieve my goal. And I think that
I'm not the only one who did that.
Oh, yes. I would like to see role-playing games, especially MMO role-playing games, go back a little bit more, so that it's more about playing the game the way that you want it to play. Like, I'm just playing the character the way I want to play it, and over the course of time, as I'm playing the character, all of these other things are unlocking because of these actions that I am taking place in. That when I rescued the Dryads, I didn't gain 5,000 faction with the Dryads. I rescued the Dryads. Their standing in the world improved, because they weren't blown off the planet by war. They're all of a sudden they have a reason to exist, and that reason to exist is because the player character saved them. And because the character saved them, now this other story elements start unlocking because of what I did in the past. That sounds like a more dynamic, living, breathing world that has consequences that all involved and wrapped up into it together. And
I'm going to add one more thing. I hope that they have, like, for example, if a faction or something does go defunct and it completely like gets wiped off the face of Norath because nobody supported it. I hope the people who are not enough people supported it. I hope that the people who did support it get like this little token or like an item or a piece of equipment or something that they get to show. Like, for example, they did a really cool. They did a lot of work for the Dryads, and so they gave them a special cloak. And now nobody else in the game can ever have that cloak because you got it.
That's the other thing about that text-based role-playing game is that unique items that you could only get for accomplishing a certain event that happened in the past were very, very rare and valuable, and they told the story about your character without having to display your character as a number. Like, I'm exalted with this faction, or I have like this faction with this. Is that it tells
title down below, champion of the.
It tells the story about your character without having to be, like, it's so narrowly defined. And like, yeah, I think that like having if you rescue the Dryads and the Dryads weave you this leaf cloak that no one else in the game has, you only have it because you were at that event. I think that it kind of sucks for the people that weren't at the event, but it starts defining that world a little bit more. That like, hey, I'm a veteran of that war, and I can show it to you because I'll grab my cloak. And Kai,
and it also, if I was a new player, if I jumped into EverQuest Next, for example, a year after it launched, and I saw somebody with the really cool leaf cloak, I'd be like, "Oh, dude, where'd you get that?" And they'd be like, "Oh," and then they would tell you the story, and it's not just like, "Oh, I ground this faction to 5,000. Well, you can't do anymore because there's no faction." There wouldn't be that. There would be like, "No, I totally helped this faction during this war, and it didn't end up working out, so that they had to move to a different area, but I got this cool cloak." That would give me hope as a player that I could do something cool like that I could have a story like that eventually. So I would be more interested in going out and like seeking out these factions to help them in their rallying calls, rather than just fucking off and doing my own thing, digging down into the world and looking for caves and stuff like that. It would like inspire me to get involved.
Especially if the level because there are no levels, right? They got rid of levels. Especially when the new player can jump into those plot lines from day one, and they don't have to spend like 2, 3, 4 weeks. Let me grind, let me power level your character so you can catch up to where we're at, so that you can participate in these events that are happening in the world. I think that it says a lot about the world if on the day that you create your first character and come into the game fresh, that you can be involved in that type of storytelling. It's essential. Like, you can't have it the other way. I think that it doesn't work if like they have to spend all of these weeks being able to grind out levels and gear to participate in events to be able to get the chance to have their place in the world. The horizontal progression is definitely where it would be the best fit for the Norath that they're trying to establish in EQ Next.
I think we got off on a tangent, but that it was a good tangent.
It's a good tangent because, bringing it back down to the tier doll. It's a boring story, but it is a necessary story. It sets up the future very well, so that not only we're all Lucy and I are interested in what happens to the tier doll in the next phase. And I was going to ask Kyle the question. I forget what it was. It was about the I don't know. It had something to do with faction grinding, because I know that you're not one that necessarily enjoys that as much as, and I don't necessarily enjoy it. I just do it because it gets me, it accomplishes what I want.
I hope that the other races get some juicy backstory like the tier doll have, so that when EverQuest Next comes out, everybody just doesn't rush and make a dark elf.
See, and I totally, I want to believe that, but if somebody mentions Forgotten Realms, what do you think of?
Yeah.
I
Dritz Do'Urden.
everybody wants to be Dritz.
Chaotic good. Drow rebel. Or, I mean, to be fair, or Elminster, I will say that.
How
And
many people
Mistra
have
and
Elmin?
the Seven Sister. Okay, I was a complete Forgotten Realms nerd growing up. From the time that I first started role playing, I'm probably gonna date myself with this. I was 11 or 12 when I first started role playing. My dad was my first GM, and I grew up in Forgotten Realms. Like, I literally spent my childhood in that world because I just threw myself into it. And so I read all the novels, and I can show you my absolute favorite book from that series is this one. You guys read that?
No one's gonna be able to make it out. This is a good
Your
thing.
camera's
camera
off
has
right now.
been bad.
Yeah.
Oh, is it better now?
No.
Oh. Well,
I mean, you sound great.
it's called The Lost Library of Cormanthier. So, if you haven't read it, read it. It's good. I grew up in this setting. So, Dritz Do'Urden is the first thing that most people think of, but
How do you say his companion feline
The panther.
name?
I don't even remember what it was.
Whenever.
Guinevere?
Blame Welsh for that because Guinevere. It's just an alternate spelling of Guinevere, but Angela, Kylest, and I kind of go back and forth on that because I'm not.
Dangerous.
All right.
But yes, I really hope that. Look, I'm bringing it back on topic. I haven't had enough wine, guys. I'm sorry. I really hope that they give us some more juicy tidbits for the other races because, yeah, juicy tidbits. I said it. Because I literally don't want, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe I'm going to be the only high elf in a sea of dark elf player characters.
Well,
and then I'll be more unique.
Yeah, okay, so far the Karens have gotten no mention as a character of a story. They're mentioned.
Wait, no, that's not true.
Where?
There was a monk in one of the ebooks. There was a
Did he have a
Karen
name?
monk. I think he did. I don't care what it was, but I think he had a
Right, but
name.
what I'm saying is that he doesn't even like at least with the dwarves we have a story where the dwarf is actually doing something. He's progressing the plot along because he's a character of the plot. The ogres have a story written about them, and though it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of kind of sucks because it's basically an ogre being chased through the jungle, and then at the end of the story their city gets blown up. But the Karens have nothing. The ogres have very little. The dwarves have very little. No mention of a halfling. No, there is a halfling that is one of the characters from the last book, but not.
He's a writer.
And it does okay. Well, let's give it to them that it does tell a little bit about what the halflings went through during the war of this when they became the slaves to the elves, because there was this story about that one village that got burned to the ground, type stuff. But no, the gnomes have nothing, and so again, I think you're absolutely right. Like there are a whole lot of other races that have stories that could be told about them that people are probably craving, and they went with it. I'm going to say it. They went with the sexy race first because everybody loves the dark elves. And they, unfortunately, I think that I hope that we see more about the other races, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
No, I don't think we're going to see a book. I don't think we're going to see a book. Well, there was a book about a dwarven thief.
Dwarven thief, yeah.
But that didn't make me want to play a dwarf.
Well,
that didn't be like my brain as an RPer and as a writer didn't go, oh my god, I could totally make a story about a dwarf that does this, or a dwarf that had been through this, or a dwarf that had this background. Whereas my brain goes, oh, So I could play a dark elf who does this, or does this, or this, or this, or this, because they have so many books about it. They give you options. I want more options for the other races. I want my brain to start thinking, oh, I could totally do this. I could totally make a unique character this way.
So, yeah. There were a couple of questions here. I feel like I should jump up to them. Legendary Neurotoxin asked the question, so who exactly are the Eldar, the Vora, and the Predak? Answer, we have no idea. They are the
I think the Eldar are elves of some kind.
like the pre-elf elves?
They maybe. I don't know if they're pre-elf though. But Eldar has always been, I think, a name that has been synonymous with an elven type, right? In other games?
Yeah. Because when I hear Eldar, I think of Warhammer 40K, and the Eldar are basically space elves. And I think that would be an interesting thing to look at and say that those 4 races are the progenitors of the other races. Like, so the Eldar evolved to become the elves. The Predak evolved to become the Karen.
I think the Pride. I'm gonna say it Pridak. I'm not sure, but it gives me like sort of like a pride sort of feeling, like cats, like maybe Karens, maybe the Vora.
I don't know, but the Elkar or the oh my god, whatever Inorak was, I think are the progenitors to the humans.
Arkhaven?
Yeah, the Arkhaven become the humans. They just don't have horns anymore.
That's right. There's no R in there. Arkhaven. I read it with an R first, since my brain obviously all the time wants to pronounce it with an R. So
right.
Arkhaven, I think are kind of like, I think they were like demon-like, or maybe dragonkin or something like that. I mean, they had horns or something.
They have horns, but I don't know. But yeah,
but they were mortal, so I don't know.
Yeah, so we have no idea what those other 4 races are. I think that Lucy is right, that they're probably the progenitors. They're the races that evolved to become the mortal races that we know, and the later eras of Norath. Have other games done anything like that where? And I don't necessarily always like making comparisons between Warcraft and the podcast, but oh my god, where Icecrown Citadel is at in Warcraft in Azeroth, Northrend. Northrend is the place I'm thinking of. If you play Alliance side, in the beginning quests of Wrath of the Lich King, you get introduced to the Verkul, which are these giant type humans. And if you play the Alliance story, you find out that the Verkul are the originators of the humans. And I always thought that was really interesting, that you learn the lore through playing the game. And so the humans started off as this tall giant race of like 8-9 feet tall people, and they evolved to the humans of Azeroth as we know them, which are normal size. Well, no, they're not normal size human. They're masculine.
Don't get me started on that.
Yeah. So
I'll go into a proper rant about how games sexualize dudes just as much as they sexualize women.
But I think, yeah, so I think that would be really cool if through the lore that we are introduced to, that all of these progenitor races, Gentile race or whatever races, evolved to become the races that we know.
Precursors. Let's just call them precursors.
Precursors, yeah. It works for me. Was it the Curse of Flesh, I think, that they mentioned?
So what again?
I know that in Warcraft, the Titans constructed mechanical and earthen races, which through the Curse of Flesh, which was basically Cthulhu magic, that transformed them into the dwarves and the gnomes. And I think it was the same sort of thing with the humans, that they started off as the Verkul, they started out with giant earthen stone creatures and evolved into the Verkul, which evolved into the humans through the Curse of Flesh. I'm not 100% sure about that, except for the gnomes and the dwarves part. That is definitely the clockwork gnomes became the human, or not human, the fleshy gnomes. Last 10 minutes. We want to wrap up. Any last questions? We got anything? From what I said about the Roman Civil War, and I draw the comparisons between the distrust of the king. Does that make you any more or any less interested in reading about maybe the Teardal coming back and establishing a kingdom, and the other elves going and saying like, no kingdoms, no kings, no leaders in that type of capacity?
Meh.
Meh.
I'm interested, but I will always read the lore.
I am. I'll bring up Warcraft. I'm sure that this should be on the drinking list if it isn't already. I don't like to be forced to consume lore outside of the platform in which I intend on consuming the lore. So if I am playing a video game, I don't want to have to get the lore outside of said video game. If I'm reading books, I don't want to have to go to another source to get all of the lore other than books. And part of my frustration is that specifically. And I get that they're doing it to set up the game, but I don't like it. And it's not a dictionary thesaurus or technical manual, nor does it read like the Silmarillion. So, boo.
Would you? That's what we need. We need to put it. I tweeted this out earlier that, like, in some regards, I wish that all of the nuggets of EverQuest Next lore that are out there weren't on the forums and weren't on blogs and weren't in tweets, but I wish that they were all in one centralized location, like the Wikipedia. And then, like, Kailas could just, like, read through the Wikipedia and get all of the, No, but it would be like an encyclopedia. It'd be like a dictionary, right?
Give me a real book or a downloadable, non-internet required to freaking consume it dictionary, thesaurus, or technical manual, or style guide. I could be okay with a style guide. It falls into the same category. The Silmarillion, totally a good book. I liked reading it. I enjoyed reading that book. Damn you naysayers. But it reads
I fell asleep. 20 pages in, I was like...
It reads like the Bible, essentially, of that particular world. Sorry. Okay. Yes, I have, but not for religious reasons.
I get that. I mean, like,
I think it's an effort to bring in people who consume lore in different ways. I think as soon as you can get into game, you're going to be able to pick up all of that stuff just through what the NPCs are doing and saying and moving around. That's their goal. And I think that they're trying to appeal to a bunch of different audiences right now. For example, I will go back to the books and I will read them again and again and again and again and again. And I will glean every tiny little detail that I can from these books. I have flashcards, you've seen them. But that's the way I consume it. And I think that they're just trying to give people like me something to do before they release the game.
No, I don't think it's bad that they're doing it. I dislike it because it's not the way I consume lore. I want to be able to consume it in game, and maybe that's just my frustration because the freaking game still isn't out yet, you dimwits.
I agree, and I think that they went with e-novels because
I agree.
I think they went with e-novels because it's actually probably the easiest way to get lore out.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a bad way to do it. It's just a bad way for me. That's exactly. It is a bad way for me, and that's.
I think they need to do a better job in capturing all of the different ways that people consume lore and getting it out to them.
Thinking that and I just mentioned that writing it and putting it into a PDF that's downloadable is probably the easiest way. I think that one of the other ways that they could do it is do like short animated YouTube videos, but probably like that is way more difficult to do than just writing it down and having people read it. A comic book would probably be like, again, a nice way to consume it for the people that like reading that type of graphical novel type format, but again, more difficult because now you have a writer, an inker, and a colorist all working together to try and produce something. So we can hope that.
Also, give me the ebooks faster, please.
Yeah, that too.
I don't care. I don't care if they have typos. Please, just which they do. By the way, I can point out 3 typos in that book. But give them
That
faster.
also annoys me.
Yeah, faster. How about just scheduled? Lining them up and
I would take scheduled.
Being like, we're gonna do this one this month, and 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 you can expect to see them. But it's
Because even if they gave us like, go ahead.
Go ahead, Lucy.
You.
How about they just give us a freaking release date for the game already?
because they probably don't know. Actually, I'm sure that they don't know.
How about they just hurry the fuck up with the game already?
So there was a question: what will we do first after the upcoming wipe later this month? I think we're going to save that for rebuild. We're going to talk a little bit about that in the next show. See if we can come to some sort of like. I have ideas. I'm just not ready to
go public with them yet.
Yeah, I'm still working on it to see if I really want to do it or if I want.
He's
or not.
still trying to convince HR the right way to make the announcement.
Yeah, working with HR. Mm-hmm. On our next show, I'm pretty sure that what we're going to talk about, I'm going to throw it out there, is that WoW tokens came out, and I know this is about WoW, but they came out earlier this week. Yeah, Kaya's even yawning at that. But because Lucy, Kyla, me, and Klaus will be back by then, all have experience in WoW, I want to talk a little bit about this is not how you monetize your game, because I think that they've completely broken. I think Warcraft just went a horrible direction, and I want to spend a little bit of time.
So wrong.
I think I want to talk a little bit about how this is a horrible way to monetize parts of your game, and what I foresee and where they disagree with me about how it detrimentally affects the gameplay.
And I will discuss how it benefits the gameplay.
And I will look into it. I have no idea what they're talking about.
Oh, you don't have no idea? Do you know how Eve works and how WildStar works, where you can buy you can buy a token in game and redeem that token to play the game for free, basically? Because
you pay to you play to pay.
Well, the one person gives the game money and they get gold. The other person gives the game gold and they play for free. So it's basically a matter of what do you prioritize more, your time or your money.
Yeah, I know what it is. Yeah.
It's funny. He's already bought 2 of the tokens with gold in game, and I am willing to drop money on said tokens to get gold in game. We have very opposite opinions on how this works.
It would definitely, for me, that kind of system would definitely be that I play to pay. So I play the game to get the money to pay for my sub, and I don't like that.
Well, it's in Warcraft. It's a little bit more complex with that. The system is still, in my opinion.
But that's a topic for next week.
Well, yeah,
this week.
Next week when Flavis is back.
Tune in next time.
Absolutely, we got to tease it out so that people come back.
Let me get my radio voice on.
Hold on, and you will get to see Tamlin and Kyla's fight again. Yay!
Did we fight this week?
No, but we
Fist
have
fight.
in the past.
Okay, well,
Everybody who
I'll
listens,
win.
everybody who listens over just podcasts are gonna lose out on that one.
I just want to start it. You're wrong.
I may be wrong, but at least I get to sleep in the bed tonight.
Couch is more comfortable. Cats don't try and occupy more space than they deserve.
We dropped the call.
How did we? Oh, Lucy! Her internet looked like it was fading fast, so it's probably a good time. So
I'm wrong?
Yes, of course you're wrong.
Married you, obviously. You want me to link the I Can Do So Much Better thing from chat a couple of episodes ago?
No. Is that really what somebody had said?
Yeah.
Oh, hurt my feelings. Okay, any questions that we did miss? Do you think EQ Next will have separate... Oh, we already covered that. I think that covers it. Do you have any last thoughts, Kai, before we wrap this up?
You're wrong.
Love you too. All right, well, call drop. Okay, that was the official notification from Lucy. The call drop. Well, that wraps it in for EverQuest, EverCast. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be back next week, same time frame. That's 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific. Oh my goodness! Hold on, I'm gonna have to drop some avatars. There we go. So why don't you camp us out, and we will.
You camp us out. You wrongity McWronger pants.
You hurt my feelings when you say that.
Oh, for God's sake. All right, camping in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good night.